my memories of ACA go back a fairly long time. And I can't pinpoint the exact era or date or whatever, but I recall as a teenager, I think, and as a college student, reading the ACA magazine, which was a wonderful, glossy...
The Bulletin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't remember whether it was a monthly or a quarterly or whatever, but it was filled with biographical information about composers and just in its appearance and in its contents, it stressed the great diversity in American music, the different styles that various people were espousing, and how positive that kind of diversity was. So that was one way in which ACA made an impact upon me years before I became a member. The other is that at Columbia I had been a student of Otto Luening, who was one of the great founders of the organization, and who was a great mentor and somebody I admired very much. And I think part of what he taught all of us, all of his composition students, went beyond the act of putting notes down on paper. It had more than simply composing. It was that you had entered a kind of, don't want to use fancy words, I was going to say priesthood, but that's not, that's very anti-Otto.
Maybe family.
Family, a community.
There we go.
That's lovely. In which
secret society.
Yeah, it turns out to be more secret than we'd like. In which you were supposed to play a role, in which, I mean, he really, by his example and by his deeds and his words, stressed the notion of being a really good citizen, and that a composer owed it to other composers to encourage them and to foster their music and to help them and to create organizations where composers could band together. And I remember years after I left Columbia and after I began to think more seriously back on my years there and about Otto, that for virtually every major musical organization that exists, to foster new music, he was there at the start. He was one of the pioneers. So that was again a way of my thinking about ACA.
I'm told he was a real storyteller. When I
yes,
talked to some of my teachers that knew him.
Great raconteur.
Right.
He was wonderful working with undergraduates, especially at a place like Columbia, which was not a conservatory,
Right.
It was a liberal arts program. And explaining music of all periods in such a way that you could understand it and you could relate to it and you could take something away from it, even though you couldn't read music. And so many of his students were, in fact, pre-law, pre-med,
Right.
History majors, chemistry majors. And he made it come alive. In many of his exams, he simply played entire movements of pieces and asked you to describe what you heard, either using highly technical knowledge, if you were one of those show-offs who knew something, or just in your own terms. He also had a very healthy disrespect for curricular requirements. I had been a pre-med for 3 years at Columbia. I was a chemistry major technically. I was completely undone by organic chemistry, which was just that's another very long story. But it was partly the fact that my father had been a physician and his two brothers were physicians, and my mother's brother was a physician, and it was the family trade. And Otto took me under his wing and did, as I think he did for so many people, found ways of getting around curricular loopholes and requirements to in fact get me to take what was the equivalent of an entire music major in 1 year, taking courses which in theory had to be prerequisites to each other.
Right.
And he once explained that he had no truck with any of this because he was very proud of saying this. He was the only full professor on the Columbia faculty who did not have a high school diploma, who had no degrees at all. His father had sent him abroad to study when he was a teenager, to live in Zurich, I believe, where he performed under Richard Strauss, and he met James Joyce and Tristan Tzara, and had an education
Right.
which was
Different kind of education.
yeah, right, exactly. So he was a great person to work with. I think when I first became more concretely interested in ACA was after I had decided to I can actually pinpoint the date, 1978, I believe, when I had decided to leave ASCAP and join BMI. And a meeting with James Roy, I think. He was a very persuasive man. Caused me to make that shift, and becoming a member of BMI suddenly tended to open up other doors.
Right, sure.
And one of them was ACA. And it seemed like a great place to meet other composers and to work and to do good things, and it still is.